Exploring societal challenges through the lens of civic science. This is the Local Perspectives program with host Diya Dwarakanath.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Diya Dwarakanath. Happy New Year to our audience. We hope everyone is staying safe amidst various weather events this season. We're kicking off 2025 with a discussion on the use of technology in voting systems to improve voting and elections. We have the pleasure of being joined by Professor Juan Gilbert from the University of Florida. Professor Gilbert is a computer scientist and chair of the Computer Science and Information Engineering Department at UF. His research lab, called Computing for Social Good, centers on human-centered computing, including electronic voting systems, voting security, and user accessibility. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's connect the dots. So tell us about your work with electronic voting systems and technology. What societal issue do you hope to tackle with this research?
Well, sure. What we are trying to do is make voting more accessible for everyone. We're trying to make it work for people who are blind, people who can't see, who can't hear, who can't read, people that don't have arms, enabling them to vote just like anyone else, as they have the right to do so. So that's where it all begins for us. And then there's obviously the security aspects of it, making sure votes are accurately cast and counted as intended.
Okay, that's really interesting. So what are you learning from all of this work that you've been doing in this area?
What I'm learning is it's not rocket science, it's actually harder. Because we deal with people, we deal with all kinds of variables that are beyond just the physics and scientific phenomenon of what happens in like a rocket science. It is very complex and it has political aspects to it. It is in many ways a moving target, but it keeps us going.
Okay, that does sound more complex to have the human factor, which is always unpredictable. What kind of what are some of the challenges you're working on addressing right now? What are some of the you mentioned in our pre setup you have some innovations in the lab that are coming out. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. So the issue that we have back in 2017, 2018, I had the pleasure of serving on a National Academies committee to look at the future of voting. And we were looking at issues in voting. And one of the things that came out of this report was the fact that given the current state of technology then and still today, we don't know how to secure an electronic or digital ballot. In other words, if the result of your vote is a digital representation, an electronic ballot, we don't know how to secure that given the current state of technology. There's no guarantee. So what we recommended was that we have to put ballots of record on paper. And so when you do that, it automatically creates a problem for certain people with certain disabilities who can't handle paper. Or what happens with people who are overseas and want to vote, or someone who can't come in to vote. And so the argument is that can they vote remotely? And doing digital ballots, we just can't secure them. So one of the things we did, we created a new technology called televoting. So remember that we created this phrase, televoting.
Okay.
The idea is that you could be remote and vote, and it results in a paper ballot that you, the voter, can actually verify. And even if you're blind, you can verify it. So we're creating this technology. We have a demo working and we're showing it to certain people. And so far, so good. But that's the latest thing coming out of the lab.
Okay. And how does this compare to the Prime 3? Because I remember reading about that on your website, that it was an electronic voting system, with the universal design, but it was almost a decade ago. And I was curious, like, what needed to happen for it to start being implemented commercially?
Yeah, so back in, a long time ago, 2003, we had the first version of Prime 3, and we called it Prime 3, Premier Third Generation Voting System. the idea was that we were going to create a technology that everyone could vote on, independent of their ability or disability. And so that's universal design, as you had mentioned. And so what we did was we created this technology, we demonstrated it, and it allows you to vote by touch and or voice, and it gives you ability to print a ballot and you can verify it. And so we created that technology, and fast forward to modern times, there are voting machine manufacturers who are creating university designed voting machines that produce a paper ballot. So that actually has transitioned. It took a long time, but they got there. So yeah, Prime 3 was our original work in this area to bring us in under accessibility and security. We made it accessible, we secured it. We built the machine for Prime 3. We have a demo where it's what I call a stateless machine. It does not have a hard drive. In fact, the software runs off of a Blu-ray DVD-ROM. So the idea was that we could run in a stateless environment. So when it was written, we knew what was on it and the code, you couldn't change it. And so we had a lot of features in that and had some success with respect to our designs transitioning into the real world. So millions of people have voted using these machines that were influenced by the work that we did many years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good to hear. So, what does stateless mean? Why was that important in the development of those systems?
Well, no one's implemented it yet, but we actually did. So let me tell you why we do stateless. The security folks would often say, well, I'm going to put malware on the machine and it's going to flip votes and then it's going to erase itself and no one would ever know. So we went stateless, meaning you can't change anything. It can't be overwritten. If it's there, it's written in stone. So we could find it. And so we designed it that way from a security perspective to get some guarantees with respect to validating what the software is, what it was, and what it will be in the future.
Okay. And is that technology and that concept being implemented in the televoting method? And how is televoting different from what we currently do with ballots, where we do go in and there's a voting machine that people use?
So currently, what you do, you go in and there's a machine there and you have a touch screen and a headset, and you may have a joystick or other features if you're disabled, and you're able to navigate and produce a ballot. So televoting is similar, but the idea is that imagine you could go on your online and you could mark your ballot, but what it's doing is printing the ballot in the precinct or in the district somewhere in front of a camera that you can actually see it. Okay. And verify it in real time. And it actually allows you to use your screen reader to read what's actually being printed if you can't see. And then once you do that, it actually sends you a text or a push. We haven't decided an app, but you would get the ability to verify that ballot on a separate device on your phone. Okay. So again, we have a demo of this technology. We've created it. So it's similar to voting in person in that the interaction is similar and it prints a ballot. It's doing the same thing, but now the ballot is afar, it's at a different place. Okay.
Yeah. I could see that being beneficial to people who would need that kind of thing if they're disabled or are overseas. So how has the feedback been from the people that you're hoping to help with this, from potential voters? And have you worked with any local community organizations for the disabled maybe, or election officials in your area to kind of test and refine the research?
Yes, so we've done demos for some security experts, and to date, none of them have found a way to hack it, meaning changing votes so it's undetectable. That's number one. Then we also did talk to some people from not necessarily local here, but from local communities in the disability community. And so they've seen it, are aware of what we were doing, and very excited about it. We haven't gotten to an election officials because we just had an election, and they said, well, we don't want to look at anything until after the election. So the election's over, January's here. So next month, we'll start talking to more election officials about our work. So we're hitting all three, meaning voters, security people, and election officials.
Okay. How how are you finding them? Who do you partner with to get, to get this like on the ground feedback?
Well, the security community, we know who they are. We're always working with them, and they know the work we do. The accessibility community is pretty well known to us, given the work we do. And there are various accessibility organizations on the grassroots and at the state level. They're familiar with our work. And so we just reach out to them, and they word spreads, and we start that way. As far as election officials, we've been connected with the United States Election Assistance Commission, the EAC. So we know the commissioners, and we talk to them. So we have been fortunate, because we've been doing this for a very long time, to have connections to various communities about the work we do.
Okay. That's good to hear. And what is some of the feedback that they've given you that has changed the way you approached the research, especially from like the disability community or from security experts even?
Well, so far, the feedback has been very positive. Things such as this seamless, it works. I get it. I can see this. One of the things that we were prepared for was dealing with security questions. So we were able to address them, and we were ready to handle all their hypothetical hacks. So we felt pretty good about that. From the accessibility community, we designed this from day one. We had experience, again, with Prime 3, creating accessible voting technologies. So what televoting is doing is actually implementing the Prime 3 interface to do the televoting. So we were able to incorporate these things. So far, feedback has been very positive. We're actually talking to a voting machine manufacturer as well, hoping that they're going to license this technology and maybe implement it in the future. So we're early in. We're really early in and just getting out there.
Okay. And I guess, with this positive feedback, what unanswered questions do you still have in your work, and what are some of the obstacles to getting those insights?
Well, some of the unanswered questions for televoting are around the technology infrastructure and how it will be implemented. And we'll get answers to that as we talk to election officials and the practical, election administration aspects of it. So we got to have those conversations. I think the televoting work, again, is so new, and we're early in it. The other project we're working on, we created something called a transparent voting machine. So this is for in-person voting. And you can go to transparentvotingmachine.com and see a demo of the prototype that we created. The idea is, imagine, so security people would often say, well, if you're going to be voting on a machine, I'm just going to flip your vote and people won't notice because it'll print the wrong thing on the paper ballot, and they don't verify it accurately or won't look closely, and they will miss it. So with that in mind, we created what's called a transparent voting machine. Imagine that you have a blank piece of paper in front of you and glass in front of it, and the glass is a touch screen where you're touching and almost interacting with the paper as the touch screen. And so essentially what we did, we turned paper into a touch screen so that we can get better confidence that they're verifying their votes. And so we actually studied it, and we were able to show that the transparent voting machine does more accurately capture errors for voters. They would notice if you flip their votes. So that technology is out there. No one's licensing it yet or anything, but that's another development from the lab.
Okay. What do you think is the hesitation to maybe license it or to implement it from more broadly?
Well, change is hard, simply put. If if no one's forcing me to implement a new voting machine, let's keep using the same old thing we've always used. It's a
Yeah.
lot of that. And so it just takes time.
Okay. Okay. And I'm interested. So, with these different types of voting machines that you've created for different purposes, um, you know, with all this work you've been doing, like, is there anything you think needs to be done to combat like voting or election misinformation that isn't already happening?
Well, that is a huge problem. And I have not worked on it much, but we do need to do something about it. I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer to that, but that is a major problem. Mis and disinformation has real consequences. It really does change outcomes of elections. So how do you combat that? Well, I would say we need more research. We need actually more data, and being able to actually experiment and show things that actually work. But we just don't have an answer yet.
Okay. Okay. And what do you mean it changes the outcome of an election?
Well, I mean, you influence the way people see things, and they vote based on that. And they're voting on a bad premise, a misinformed premise, a deliberately misinformed premise.
Right.
And that can have an effect on the election.
Okay. And like related to that, like when you're reaching out to, maybe like the disability community, they may know a lot actually about how voting systems work, but as a general voter, I don't know a lot about how the voting technology and these machines actually work. So have you spent time developing kind of communication material or things just to explain how does this machine even work?
I haven't worked on that. I know the voting machine manufacturers have a lot of people who expertise is in that area, and that's what they do.
Okay.
Our lab has not worked on that. The things that we've created, we go directly to them and say, "This is what we've done," and we ask them to take a look.
Okay.
And again, I'm not a voting machine manufacturer. What we're doing is inventing technologies to address problems and issues in elections, and hoping that our innovations, and we create them, and then we evaluate them with people. We run studies, experiments, and we get validated through those experiments. And we hope that this technology, once we figure out what works, translates into the real world through those manufacturers.
And what has been the most surprising lesson learned while working on improving the accessibility of voting systems and developing these innovations?
It takes time. I mean, we created Prime 3 years ago, and it took years for the voting machine manufacturers to, use those designs and start doing things. So the time to transition from the lab into the real world is a lesson we've learned, and something that we've kind of adapted to. And so that's something you have to account for. It's just going to take time. You may have solved the problem, but it takes time to get it out there.
And how has that lesson kind of inspired you to take action, or other lessons you've learned? How have they inspired you to take action? In what ways?
Well, we've worked in this area of voting technologies, and we often reflect on the fact that, people have died for the right to vote in this country. And we have influenced voting in the country through our research. That is a really big deal. And so from our perspective, we're looking at it as we're having an impact that really matters. And so it makes these delays and getting into the real world, it makes it more easier to handle, because we know the impact of our work and how it can have an effect on society.
Yeah, makes sense. What actionable advice would you give other researchers interested in doing similar work, and in terms of getting it actually in the real world? Because it sounds like you have a lot of you have developed a lot of those connections and partnerships.
Be patient, be diligent, and understand it's just going to take time. It's not easy. And in this particular domain of elections and voting, it's politics. I don't know how else to put it. You're going to have to deal with all kinds of the human factor from a political perspective. And that is another challenge as well.
So what actionable advice on dealing with politics can you give someone just getting started in this area?
The first thing to do is acknowledge that the politics exists. That, sometimes you're going to be asked, well, how does this benefit my side? You got to be ready for those kind of things.
Makes sense. Okay. And from working on something that can be political, like what's been a big takeaway for you that maybe you didn't expect going into it?
Well, again, it's a lesson learned on how to navigate the space between political affiliations and political ways of thinking. And so we're coming at from a research scientific perspective. And it's often the case where we see it as this works. But sometimes from a political lens, it's not so much whether it works or not, it's whether it works for us. And you got to understand how to navigate that space.
Gotcha. And have you, like in your engagement with security folks, I was curious, who do you kind of tend to, who are those security folks and experts that you work with?
Well, we work with people who are nationally known, professors and researchers. We work with individuals from all kinds of different places that are in this space. They speak up and say, why they believe, technology won't work with voting and things. So it's a plethora of individuals.
Okay. And I understand you'll be presenting at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS conference next month on the future of voting. And what is that future for you?
Well, the real punchline is everyone, whenever they see the future of voting, the same question always comes up. Can I vote on the internet? Can I vote on my phone? Right now, the answer is no. There's no way to secure a digital ballot, and I will explain that in my talk. And I will talk about some of the things we've done and paint the landscape for voting technology and voting in general, and at least set the stage of where we are now and where we could be headed.
Okay. And I am curious about that. Is that something you can briefly mention? What are the challenges of securing a digital ballot? Do you see that changing in the future?
I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon. To my knowledge, no one's working on it because it's that hard. From a perspective of most non-technical people, they say, well, if I encrypt my ballot, won't that help? Well, it's not so much. Encryption doesn't protect you from deletion. It doesn't protect you from manipulation so that it's unrecognized. There's so many other things at play here. Digital ballots given the current state of technology, we do not know how to secure a digital ballot. Point blank, that's just a fact.
Okay. So what's next for you with televoting and all of this other work? Is there things in the pipeline, or is there anything that you may not have time to share in your talk, for instance, that you think is important for us to know on this topic for our audience to know?
The next thing, you're going to hear more about televoting and the work we're doing there. The transparent voting machine, we've completed that. We did a study. We have working prototypes where we can demonstrate it. The stateless voting machine aspect that powers these innovations. So we're going to keep doing these things, and you'll hear more about them. again, the aspiration and hope is to get it translated into the real world. So we are hoping to work with vendors, and maybe they'll pick up the technology and we can get it out there.
Thank you. With that, we have to wrap up, even though there's so much more we could keep talking on this really interesting topic. To our audience, thank you for watching. Please share with us how this episode inspired you to take action by clicking on the link below in the description. Professor Gilbert's lab also works on really interesting things like AI accuracy in medical diagnostics across ethnic groups, for example, and some other work. And so feel free to check out the link to that as well. As always, science belongs to all of us. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.